Hello YouTubers, Chief Prepper here. I thought it fitting to eat my pie while I talked about food. One of the things about food that depresses me is, there's a lot of information out there, even in the mainstream media, about shortages. So I'm going to give you some insight into if the shortages get bad enough, if you haven't thought about it. And I never really thought about it, but I started thinking about it about 4 or 5 months ago, and kind of realized that even though me and my wife are pretty prepped up food-wise, that we're going to be hurting when we run out of the press. So I have a meat source, possibly two protein sources. I have chickens. I haven't gotten an egg out of them yet. I have a lake within walking distance that I can probably catch some fish out of. But I don't have beef. I don't have pork. I don't have the ability to get milk. I don't have the ability to make cheese. I don't have the ability to make butter. So I'm going to give you a real simple thing to think about. Take stock of everything that you buy and you bring into your house. If you cannot make it, grow it, or produce it, then that should help you identify some things that you need to work on. There's a prepping channel that pops up. I can't think of the name of it, but it's a woman who talks about her, I want to say her father, maybe grandfather, I think it's father, about homesteading, and she brought up a dairy cow, a beef cow, meat chickens, pork for fat, a bunch of other stuff. So unfortunately, this is going to make you sad. It's probably going to bother you. But once you start paying attention to what you buy and what you bring into your house and how much of that you cannot reproduce, then that should give you an idea of things you need to work on. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is tonight I cooked dinner. Since I retired, I kind of took over cooking for my wife. She still works, but I don't believe she should have to work the hours she works, which is 8-ish, and then come home and cook at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. So tonight, about 6:10 until 7:45, 8 o'clock, which is about the time I finished up with doing the dishes and putting the kitchen back. I was thinking to myself how much more work it would be to cook. So when I was growing up, my mother never spent all day in the kitchen that I can remember, except on Thanksgiving and Christmas maybe, when she was cooking. When she got really old, she didn't. But cooking is going to become a full-time measure that will have to be a well thought out and executed process every time it's done. We're very wasteful as human beings right now because we live in a world of plenty. Pitbull Premier just had a video where he was talking about people who sent him notes about the diets that some people had in some of these countries that fell to communism and socialism. This is what I can tell you. If you look at pictures from World War II, you really don't see fat people. Any fat people. And that's because food and resources become so scarce that you just can't get them. So tonight I cooked spaghetti. The ground beef came out of a package. So it's something I can't reproduce. I don't have a meat grinder. I don't have a cow to cut up. The noodles, my wife can make noodles, but she typically only makes the lasagna noodles. But if the noodles came out of a package, so we might be able to reproduce that, but you gotta have a lot of eggs. The spaghetti sauce was Prego, garlic, and herbs, so you would have to grow a boatload of tomatoes, you would have to grow garlic and whatever else is in there. So maybe, but right now probably not. This past summer, I typically grow tomatoes well, but this past summer we got like 2 pickings, and then we got a blight because we had so much rain, and the blight took out some pepper plants and took out the tomato plants. So, and then the bread. The bread loaf was about 2/3 the size it normally is from the grocery store we buy it from, so shrinkflation is well and everything. So if you think about what you need to make bread, you need flour. And if you prepper and say you got 25, 30, 40 pounds of flour, and bread flour actually works a lot better than all-purpose or general-purpose flour. And you got yeast and you got some other stuff. Once you run out of that, if you don't have wheat berries and a way to grind them up to make flour, then your ability to have bread is gone. So I encourage all of you to start thinking about the meals that you prepare, the amount of water it will take to clean up the dishes, and the time it takes to cook. And realize that if we go into a really bad place in American history where we're going from a country where we have plenty to where people are fighting over groceries in the aisles or some other crazy stuff, then this bothers me so much that I don't like to think about it, and I don't know what to tell all of you, but if you don't start thinking about it, then it's going to literally slap you in the face. So I put on another video about, I have some idea how it will be, and I'm going to tell you another quick story. One of the things that young soldiers or young people in the military struggle with is when you go to any kind of, or I'll just say basic training, or like a deployment or training exercise, you really only have access to food 3 times a day. They're not feeding you to gluttony, they're feeding you enough, and then you realize that when you're in the field training, or you're doing, I call it army camping, or you're doing basic training, or when I went to war a couple of times, your physical activity drastically increases. So with that comes burning of calories, and your caloric intake needs to go up, but it normally doesn't, so you're normally hungry. So one of the things about as a civilian, when you get hungry, you walk between 20 and we'll go as far as 100 feet to the refrigerator and kitchen. You pull out whatever you want and you eat it. And in the Army, when you go to chow, you go to a dining facility, you have breakfast, you have lunch. When I was in the war zone the first time, most of our lunches were MREs. And then supper, you may get a T-rat. And then on the field training exercises, sometimes it was 3 MREs a day. Technically, you're supposed to be able to survive on 1. So, other prepping channels have talked about we're going to have to get used to eating less. So if you look at the piece of pie, I don't know if you can see it because I can't see the video. I'll review it before I post it. When I eat pies, this is a 1/4 slice of pie. And it's a deep dish, 2-pound, 6-ounce pie. I'm on my 4th one so far this year. So it's the one time a year that I actually enjoy food. I like a lot. But you we really need to start looking at our food. I have spent probably the last 6 months looking for and finding seeds. The problem with that is I'm a beginning gardener, so there's so much you have to learn about gardening that it's a real challenge. I have all of my pepper plants, with the exception of my bell pepper plants, have taken off. I've got a bunch I need to pick, which is typically the case down here. I water them all summer and they don't produce that many peppers, and then come fall, man, there's just peppers everywhere. So, look at your food, look at what you go and buy, and think about how you're going to replace where you're getting it at, or the fact that you will get drastically less. If you're a prepper, hopefully you've got canned goods, dry goods, and other sources of protein. Protein is going to be the big thing. Talking about economic collapse, they're talking about on the news, supply chain issues aren't going to go away anytime soon. The Transportation Secretary made a news article the day before yesterday actually saying that. I'm not entirely sure that it's not, this crap is not on purpose. Over and over and over we talk about 2030, 2021 reset. Basically, nothing can happen unless the U.S. is on board. And the only way the U.S. is on board is if they break the country economically and they force people to have to capitulate to whatever they want in order to get food. And that is the one thing that people will do anything for when they get hungry enough. So, I've said a couple times on public channels that when you get hungry enough, you will eat your best friend. And I ain't talking about Scruffy the dog. So, I think we're heading into bad times. I will echo all of the things that everyone says. If you need it and you have money, buy it. I'm looking at buying some tire sensors and 4 tires and putting them on an old set of wheels for a Jeep. I've got to make sure they'll fit my wife's Jeep, but my wife's Jeep is going to need tires in the spring, and I'm going to buy them if I can find them here in the next couple of months. Just so, assuming we can find gas, that when she needs tires, and we just unbolt the ones that are on there and bolt the other ones on there. Having said all that, don't give up, don't panic, try not to go down that path. I have a friend of mine that is slowly coming to the realization that everything that I've been talking to him about for the past 6 months is something he actually needs to deal with. He is one of those people that doesn't want to think about how bad it's going to be. He doesn't want to admit it. So, but now he's kind of being forced into a position. I sent him a note saying that the one thing that bothers me the most about everything that's happening is I've never been the richest, I've never been at the top, I've never been the very best, but I've always been able to flourish. And if we go by the way of socialism, I will lose the ability to work harder, work longer, work faster, be the best, and find a way to be not at the bottom. So, Chief Prepper out. Y'all have a good night.